Welcome back to the Behavior Code. I'm Maria.
And I'm Gabriel. So today we're diving into something I think everyone deals with, whether they realize it or not.
Exactly. We're talking about the subtle ways people test your boundaries. And I think the key word here really is subtle, because we often think of boundary pushing as this big, aggressive, obvious thing.
Right. Like someone demanding something from you. But it's almost never like that, is it? It's quieter. It's the little things that leave you feeling kind of off, but you can't quite put your finger on why.
That feeling of being slightly taken advantage of. So, in psychology, boundary testing is basically when a person either consciously or unconsciously probes the limits you've set for your time, your energy, your emotions, your resources in general.
And they do this for all kinds of reasons, right? It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's about seeking safety, seeing how you'll react to know if they're secure in the relationship. Other times it can be, a subtle play for power or control.
Yeah, or just familiarity. They're used to a certain dynamic, maybe from their family, and they're trying to replicate it with you. A lot of the time, it's just an unconscious habit they're not even aware of.
Which is why it's so important to recognize it. Because if you don't, you're letting someone else define the terms of your own life. So, let's get into the specifics. What do these little tests actually look like?
Okay, so let's start with segment one, the micro behaviors. These are the tiny, everyday actions. The first big one for me is the small ask that escalates.
Oh yeah, the foot in the door technique.
Totally. It starts with, hey, can you just look over this one paragraph for me? And you say yes, because it's just a paragraph. But then next week, it's, could you proofread this whole report? And before you know it, you're basically co-writing their projects.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Each yes makes the next bigger ask feel less unreasonable. It's a slow erosion of your boundary around your work and time.
Exactly. Another one is interrupting, not just in an excited conversational way, but consistently talking over you.
And what's insidious about it is that it often masquerades as a compliment. Oh, I'm just asking you because you're so much better at this stuff than I am. It feels good, so you say yes, but it's a trap. It's using flattery to justify offloading work.
And it works so well because it preys on our natural inclination to be helpful and agreeable. We want to be seen as a team player, as a good friend. Each small yes feels like a deposit into that social bank account.
Until you look at your account statement and realize you're emotionally overdrawn. It's a classic technique, whether done consciously or not, to slowly expand the scope of what's considered acceptable for you to do for them. Yeah, this one is huge. It's a test to see if you'll cede the floor. If you stop talking every time they start, you're implicitly teaching them that their voice is more important than yours. It's a subtle dominance play.
Right, and it signals that your thoughts aren't worth hearing all the way through. It's so disrespectful, but it happens so fast it can be hard to even register in the moment. And it can be incredibly invalidating. It sends the message that what you have to say doesn't matter or isn't as interesting as what they have to say. Over time, that can seriously chip away at your confidence to speak up at all.
Then there's the cousin of the small ask, what you might call favor creep. This is less about escalating tasks and more about frequency, especially in professional settings. If you're constantly being interrupted in meetings, it can undermine your authority and make you seem less competent to others. It's a way of diminishing your presence. In a professional setting, this can manifest as things like heap-eating, where a man repeats an idea a woman just said and gets credited for it. It's a way of subtly erasing her contribution by talking over her original thought.
Okay, explain that one.
Then there's the cousin of the small ask, what you might call favor creep. This is less about escalating tasks and more about frequency. It's when someone asks for a small favor, say, picking up their coffee. You do it once, then a week later, they ask again. Soon, it's an unspoken expectation that you're the designated coffee runner. The favor became a job you never applied for.
Oh, that's so true. It slowly shifts the dynamic until you're in a service role you never agreed to. Okay, what about the more emotional side of things? Or the friend who asks to borrow a book, then another, then another, until your bookshelf basically becomes their personal library. There's no single big ask, just a constant stream of small ones that slowly but surely erodes your ownership of your own things.
And this isn't just about physical tasks. It's a huge issue with emotional labor, too. You become the friend who is always expected to listen to everyone's problems, the one who has to mediate every conflict. That favor of lending an ear becomes an unwritten job description.
And the really tricky part is that each individual favor seems so small that it feels petty to say no. You're not going to pick me up a coffee? What's the big deal? But the big deal is the pattern. It's the slow accumulation of expectation. Ah, yes, the subtle emotional pressure. This is a masterclass in manipulation for some people. It's not direct. It's a heavy sigh when you say you're busy, or a sudden shift in their tone of voice from warm to cold after you say no.
Oh, that's so true. It slowly shifts the dynamic until you're in a service role you never agreed to. Okay, what about the more emotional side of things? The guilt cues, exactly. It's a way of saying, you've disappointed me without having to actually say it. They're testing to see if their emotional state can control your behavior. Will you backtrack and say yes just to make them feel better?
And for a lot of us, especially people pleasers, that is an incredibly effective tactic. Another classic is the "I guess I'll just have to do it myself" line, delivered with a world-weary sigh. It's designed to make you feel like a bad person for not rushing to their rescue. It's a passive-aggressive way of demanding your help.
For sure. The last microbehavior I want to touch on is testing your time. This is a big one. It's the friend who consistently shows up 15 minutes late. It's the colleague who schedules a meeting and then cancels it at the very last minute.
And for a lot of us, especially people pleasers, that is an incredibly effective tactic.
Oh, the strategic sigh is a weapon of mass destruction in some families. Or just a pointed silence. They ask you to do something, you say no, and they just go quiet. And in that silence, you're meant to squirm and feel guilty and reverse your decision.
Right. These actions, whether intended or not, send a clear message. My time is more valuable than your time. They are testing to see if you'll tolerate being deprioritized. And if you never say anything, you're basically saying, "You're right, my time doesn't matter as much."
For sure. The last microbehavior I want to touch on is testing your time. This is a big one. It's the friend who consistently shows up 15 minutes late. It's the colleague who schedules a meeting and then cancels it at the very last minute. And it's wild how all these tiny things weave together to create these really powerful, unspoken dynamics in our relationships. And it's not just about being late. It's also about expecting you to drop everything for their emergency that isn't really an emergency. They're testing to see if their priorities can instantly become your priorities.
Another version of this is the person who expects you to be on call 24/7. They'll text you at all hours and expect an immediate response, or try to start a deep, serious work conversation at 5 minutes to 5 on a Friday. They're testing your availability boundary. Another version of this is the person who expects you to be on call 24/7. They'll text you at all hours and expect an immediate response, or try to start a deep, serious work conversation at 5 minutes to 5 on a Friday. They're testing your availability boundary.
Which is a perfect transition to our next segment. Let's talk about the bigger picture, the social dynamics that reveal this stuff on a larger scale.
And it's wild how all these tiny things weave together to create these really powerful, unspoken dynamics in our relationships. All right, segment 2, social dynamics. So how does this play out in groups?
Well, group settings are like a laboratory for boundary testing. Just watch who talks over you. Notice who systematically interrupts you but lets others finish. Also, pay attention to who delegates to you, especially when they have no formal authority over you.
Yeah, the person in a group project who just decides, okay, Maria, you'll take the notes. It's a test of your assertiveness. Will you accept the role assigned to you, or will you say, actually, let's decide together who's doing what?
Exactly. This bleeds directly into workplace power dynamics. It's the coworker who asks you for help that's actually just them pushing their own tasks onto your plate. They frame it as collaboration, but really, they're testing if you'll do their job for them. Another one to watch for in groups is who takes credit for your ideas. You'll say something, it gets ignored, and then 5 minutes later, someone else says the exact same thing, and suddenly it's brilliant. It's a subtle way of erasing you from the conversation.
And they often target the people they perceive as most helpful or least likely to say no. They're probing for the path of least resistance. If you always say yes, you become their default for offloading work.
Exactly. This bleeds directly into workplace power dynamics. It's the coworker who asks you for help that's actually just them pushing their own tasks onto your plate. They frame it as collaboration, but really, they're testing if you'll do their job for them. This happens so much in families, too. The patterns are so deeply ingrained. You get cast in a role early on. Maybe you're the responsible one. And this can be especially tricky when there's a subtle power imbalance, even if you're peers. The person who's been at the company longer, or who is more socially popular, might feel entitled to delegate to you, even if they're not your boss. They're leveraging social capital to test your professional boundaries.
Or the peacemaker. And a lot of the time, this is gendered. Women are often expected to take on the office housework, organizing parties, taking notes, remembering birthdays. These are unwritten rules, but they are powerful boundary tests.
Right. And your family just expects you to fulfill that role forever. So, the responsible one is always expected to organize the family gatherings, and the peacemaker is always expected to mediate arguments. It's a constant passive test. Any attempt to step out of that role is met with confusion or resistance.
Because you're disrupting the system they're comfortable with. You're violating an unspoken rule, a boundary that was set for you, not by you. And then, of course, there's romantic relationships.
And these roles can be incredibly limiting. If you're the funny one, for example, it can feel impossible to have a serious conversation about something that's bothering you because everyone expects you to just make a joke. They test your boundary to be a whole complex person. A minefield for boundary testing, especially in the early stages.
Because you're disrupting the system they're comfortable with. You're violating an unspoken rule, a boundary that was set for you, not by you. And then, of course, there's romantic relationships. Totally. It can be small things, like showing up unannounced to see how you react, or making plans for both of you without asking you first. They're probing your limits. How much autonomy are you willing to give up?
Or even teasing you about something you're a little insecure about. They're testing your emotional boundaries. Will you laugh it off to be a good sport, or will you say, "Hey, I don't like it when you joke about that"? How you respond to those early little tests sets the entire precedent for the relationship.
It really does. It's the foundation. Okay, so we know what it looks like, but let's talk about the why. What's going on in someone's head when they do this?
Another big one in relationships is checking your phone or asking who you're texting. It's often framed as a joke or as caring about you, but it's a test of your privacy boundaries. It's seeing if you'll allow them access to your private world without question.
All right, segment 3, the psychology behind it. A lot of this can be tied back to attachment styles, which are formed in early childhood.
It really does. It's the foundation. Okay, so we know what it looks like, but let's talk about the why. What's going on in someone's head when they do this? Right. For example, someone with an anxious attachment style might test boundaries because they're deeply afraid of abandonment. They might push for more time, more reassurance, constantly probing to see if you're still there and if you still care. It's coming from a place of fear.
And on the flip side, someone with an avoidant style might test your boundaries by creating distance to see if you'll give them the space they crave without making them feel suffocated. It's a test of your independence.
That makes so much sense. Then you have people who simply grew up without boundaries. And someone with a secure attachment style is less likely to test boundaries in these ways because they're more confident in the relationship stability. They don't need to poke and prod to know where they stand. But they might test your boundaries in other ways to make sure you're a good fit for them. For example, they might test your ability to communicate your needs clearly.
Yeah, in some families, privacy isn't a thing. Doors are always open, mail gets read, Personal conversations are fair game for everyone. People from those backgrounds, they genuinely might not understand the concept of personal limits because it was never modeled for them. It's like they're running a diagnostic on the relationship. If I do this, what will you do? It's a way of gathering data about what they can expect from you and how the relationship will function.
They're not necessarily being malicious, they're just operating on a completely different set of social rules. They're relationally illiterate in a way.
But then you have the more intentional testers, the people who use boundary testing as a form of control. And when you try to set a boundary with someone like this, they often react with genuine confusion or hurt. They might say something like, "Why are you being so secretive?" Or, "I don't understand why you won't tell me." They perceive your boundary as a rejection of them personally because they don't have a framework for understanding it any other way.
This is the darker side of it. For these individuals, every interaction is a negotiation of power. Pushing your boundaries is a way to establish dominance, to make you smaller and make them feel bigger. They get a sense of satisfaction from seeing you bend to their will.
But then you have the more intentional testers, the people who use boundary testing as a form of control. It's a really unhealthy dynamic and often a hallmark of narcissistic or manipulative personalities. They're constantly trying to see what they can get away with.
But it's important to remember, like we said at the beginning, that not all boundary testing is conscious or controlling. A huge chunk of it is just unintentional. And with these types, you'll notice that they don't just test your boundaries, they steamroll them. If you say no, they'll argue, wheedle, or threaten until you give in. It's not about finding a comfortable middle ground, it's about winning.
Absolutely. The friend who's always late might just have poor time management skills, not a secret desire to disrespect you. The coworker who interrupts might just be really passionate and excited about an idea. It's not always a test. Sometimes it's just a personality quirk or a bad habit. The impact is the same, but the intent is different.
But it's important to remember, like we said at the beginning, that not all boundary testing is conscious or controlling. A huge chunk of it is just unintentional. Which is why our response is so crucial. But before we get to that, let's turn the lens on ourselves. How do we recognize our own patterns in all of this? And that's why it's so important to approach these situations with curiosity rather than accusation. If you assume positive intent, you can address the behavior without attacking the person. For example, you could say, "I know you're excited, but I'd love to finish my thought." That's a much more effective approach than, "You're always interrupting me."
Okay, segment 4, recognizing your own patterns. I think the first step is figuring out if you're what you might call a default accommodator.
Which is why our response is so crucial. But before we get to that, let's turn the lens on ourselves. How do we recognize our own patterns in all of this? What are the signs of that?
You're the person who says yes before you've even really thought about the request. You often apologize for things that aren't your fault. The thought of someone being unhappy with you causes you genuine distress. Your default setting is just to go along with things to keep the peace.
And that accommodation often comes with a huge side of guilt. Why do we feel so guilty saying no? And keeping the peace often means sacrificing your own peace. You're so focused on managing everyone else's emotions that you neglect your own. You become a chameleon, changing your colors to blend in with whoever you're with, and you lose sight of who you actually are and what you actually want.
Well, for many of us, it's learned. We were taught as kids that being good meant being helpful and compliant. Saying no was seen as selfish or rude. So now, as adults, when we try to set a boundary, this little alarm goes off in our brain that screams, "You're being a bad person."
And that accommodation often comes with a huge side of guilt. Why do we feel so guilty saying no? That's so real. You have to unlearn that equation of no equals selfish. Instead, you have to learn that no equals self-respect.
Exactly. And your body often tells you when your boundaries are being crossed before your brain does. These are the emotional tells. Do you feel a knot of anxiety in your stomach when a certain person calls? Do you feel this simmering resentment after you agree to do something? Do you spend hours overthinking a simple interaction? And that guilt can be a powerful motivator to just give in. It feels easier in the moment to say yes than to sit with the discomfort of feeling like you've let someone down. But in the long run, that discomfort is a sign of growth. It's a sign that you're choosing yourself.
Resentment is the big one. That's a huge red flag. Resentment is often just a boundary that you failed to set in the past. It's your heart's way of saying, I shouldn't have agreed to that.
Exactly. And your body often tells you when your boundaries are being crossed before your brain does. These are the emotional tells. Do you feel a knot of anxiety in your stomach when a certain person calls? Do you feel this simmering resentment after you agree to do something? Do you spend hours overthinking a simple interaction? So true. And a lot of this, again, comes back to your upbringing. If you grew up in a household where your opinions weren't valued, or if you had to be the emotional caretaker for a parent, you learned that your needs come second. Another one is exhaustion. If you feel completely drained after interacting with someone, that's a sign that you're giving away too much of your energy. You're letting them overdraw from your account. Healthy interactions should be, for the most part, energizing, not depleting.
You learned to ignore your own internal signals. So now, as an adult, it can feel unnatural or even dangerous to prioritize yourself. Recognizing those old patterns is the first step to changing them. Another emotional tell is feeling a sense of dread when you see their name pop up on your phone. That feeling is your intuition screaming at you that this person is a drain on your resources.
Okay, so let's get into the practical stuff, the how-to. And it's important to have compassion for yourself in this process. You're not weak or broken for having these patterns. You're a survivor. You learned these behaviors to get your needs met in a difficult environment. The key is to recognize that you're not in that environment anymore, and you can learn new, healthier ways of relating to people.
The key here, because we're talking about subtle tests, is a subtle response. You don't need a huge confrontation. You need what are called micro-assertions.
Okay, so let's get into the practical stuff, the how-to. I like that term. What does that look like?
They're small, calm corrections. If someone interrupts you, instead of just stopping, you can hold up a hand slightly and say, "Hang on, let me just finish my thought." It's not aggressive, it's just a simple course correction.
And the tone you use is everything. If you're defensive or angry, you escalate the situation. But if you use a calm, neutral, almost bored tone, it resets the dynamic. It communicates that your boundary isn't a negotiation, it's just a fact. Or if someone makes a joke at your expense, you don't have to laugh along. You can just give them a flat look and say, "I don't find that funny." You're not starting a fight, you're just refusing to play the game.
That bored tone is so powerful because it removes the emotional charge from the interaction. If someone is testing you, they're often looking for a reaction. If you don't give them one, you take away their power. You're showing them that you're not going to be drawn into their drama. Another micro-assertion, if someone is standing too close for comfort, is to simply take a small step back. You don't have to say anything. The movement itself is the boundary. Yes, let's run through some scripts. For the friend who's always late, instead of a big lecture, just a simple, "Hey, next time if you're running more than 10 minutes late, just shoot me a text so I can adjust my plans." It's clear, simple, and about future behavior. Yes, let's run through some scripts. For the friend who's always late, instead of a big lecture, just a simple, "Hey, next time if you're running more than 10 minutes late, just shoot me a text so I can adjust my plans." It's clear, simple, and about future behavior.
For the coworker asking you to do their work instead of "I can't," which invites argument, try "I don't have the capacity to take that on right now." It's impersonal and non-negotiable.
For the person who uses guilt, like with a heavy sigh, you can either ignore it completely, which is powerful, or you can just calmly state your position again. "I hear that you're disappointed, but my answer is still no." You acknowledge their feeling without taking responsibility for it. Another good one is, "Let me think about that and get back to you." This is a great way to buy yourself some time and avoid making a decision under pressure. It gives you a chance to check in with yourself and decide what you really want to do, rather than just reacting in the moment.
And that leads to the final, most important point, how to hold the line without over-explaining. You don't owe anyone a long-winded justification for your boundaries.
For the person who uses guilt, like with a heavy sigh, you can either ignore it completely, which is powerful, or you can just calmly state your position again. I hear that you're disappointed, but my answer is still no. You acknowledge their feeling without taking responsibility for it. This is so hard for people pleasers. We think if we just explain our reasoning perfectly, they'll understand and not be mad.
But it doesn't work that way. Giving a lot of reasons just gives the other person things to argue with. No is a complete sentence. That doesn't work for me is a complete sentence. The less you say, the stronger your position is.
It's such a powerful shift in mindset. Okay, so as we wrap up, let's bring it all together. And if they keep pushing, you can just become a broken record. Just keep repeating your boundary in a calm, neutral tone. I understand you're in a tough spot, but I'm not available to help. I hear you, but the answer is still no. It can feel awkward, but it's incredibly effective.
The big takeaway here is that these subtle, tiny tests matter. They matter a lot because they set the tone for the entire relationship. How you handle the small things determines how you'll be treated in the big things.
It's such a powerful shift in mindset. Okay, so as we wrap up, let's bring it all together.
Exactly. And I want to leave our listeners with some encouragement. If this is hard for you, that's okay. Setting boundaries is a skill. It's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets and the easier it becomes.
And remember, it's not about being selfish or mean. It's about creating relationships that are built on mutual respect. When you have clear boundaries, people know where they stand with you, and that creates a sense of safety and trust for everyone.
Well said. So, our call to action for you this week is simple. Just pay attention. Try to notice one subtle boundary test that comes your way. You don't have to do anything about it. Just notice it. That awareness is the first and most important step.
Exactly. And I want to leave our listeners with some encouragement. If this is hard for you, that's okay. Setting boundaries is a skill. It's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets and the easier it becomes. Thanks for tuning in to The Behavior Code. We'll talk to you next week. And if you're feeling brave, maybe try one small micro assertion. Just one. See how it feels. It might be scary, but it's also the first step towards a more authentic and empowered life. Thanks for tuning in to The Behavior Code. We'll talk to you next week.